Set timer for 10 minutes. Please don't.
I'll start your timer for 10 minutes.
Can you, like, just do it silently? Is that something we can work on as a couple? Hopefully this is in focus. I don't know how to tell this story. The Medium, released by Bloober Team in 2021, is a dull, tedious walking simulator that pretends to be a survival horror game. Sorry, that's not fair. Look, I've made a video about The Medium in the past. I haven't rewatched that video for this one, so I don't know how much of what I said I stand by. I do cringe thinking back at the one point I made that depression and sadness are two different things, while flashing a definition on the screen that contradicted me. I shrugged it off with on-screen text, and I do agree with my past self for the record. I think colloquially we understand sadness to be a symptom of depression, but that depression, for those of us who've lived it, is a deeper, more existential emotion, often lasting longer and being harder to shake off. I didn't approach my videos then with as much contemplation or nuance. I was concerned more about being catchy, being entertaining, being firm and abrasive in my opinions. This video is not going to be that. I replayed The Medium for this video, as well as Silent Hill 2 original and Bloober Team's remake. I still don't like The Medium, at all. Did I seriously just get stuck on terrain at the very end of the fucking game? I think ultimately The Medium's biggest flaw is that it's boring as sin and feels more than a little pretentious.
This place is packed with memories. Bad ones. Guilt. Humiliation. Rage. That glow. There's a sense of loneliness coming from it. This thing isn't a razor, it's guilt, shame, regret.
This is my third time playing through it, and I don't think any of my thoughts on it as a game have changed. It's an artful and cinematic project with pretty good music, partially helmed by Silent Hill's Akira Yamaoka, and it's got some really beautiful environment design and art direction for the majority of the game, but the entirety of my body will literally atrophy if I ever have to play this shit again. So just to get us started on why I decided to do this, why I decided to replay The Medium, it's because I keep thinking about The Medium's prescription for broken people. Just give up.
It all ends in me.
It's the infamous refrain, "You can't save everyone." As the world gets heavier, its gravity increasingly inescapable, I find myself fighting less to keep my balance, to stay upright. And as I lay stinking and rotting in my own flesh and tearful waste, I wonder, what if The Medium was right?
Only you can end this.
You can't always save everyone, butterfly.
On April 11th, 2026, I'll be releasing a new album of music. It's alt-rock, Radiohead inspired, but without the milquetoast faux progressive Zionist kumbaya liberalism.
I have been a fan of Radiohead my whole life. I had my qualms with their stance on Palestine for a while. I can't hold back any longer. Roger, after seeing what Tom York did on stage back in October, this is a year into the genocide.
Yeah.
He's going on stage for his encore of Karma Police, and a pro-Palestine demonstrator yells out something in the audience, and his reaction was so belligerent.
Come up here and say that, right here. Come on. And say what you want to say. Don't stand there like a coward. Come here and say it. Come on. Oh, gosh. What can you do? Say it.
One of the songs is named Schizophrenia, about someone I dated briefly but intensely, someone I loved whose life collapsed from apparent psychosis. I don't know how to tell this story. I don't know if I should be talking about this, but considering we have literal rapists, pedophiles, and Nazis spewing nonsense day in and out, I figure I wouldn't be causing any harm in the world to get real vulnerable and talk about something that's deeply affected me the last few years. I'm not even on here accusing my therapist of trying to groom me.
A couple weeks ago, on the full moon, when I was ovulating, I had a dream about you. We hooked up right here in this office, and he all of a sudden just looked so uncomfortable.
Obviously. Who wouldn't look uncomfortable at their client coming in and saying, hey, I had a dream where we f***ed in this office?
For the sake of privacy, I'll be referring to this person as Q. I won't be showing any photos of her or giving any identifying information except to say that she was 28 at the time that we met, which is apparently the age at which symptoms of schizophrenia most commonly begin to appear in women. She was a heavy weed smoker too, which most certainly didn't help. I will be sharing some snippets of text exchanges only to highlight the extent of her mental illness and our relationship when I feel it's necessary. Also, please recognize that I'm sharing this from my own limited perspective with my own biases. I won't be discussing in detail anything I learned that I didn't witness or experience myself. And there's a lot that happened behind the scenes, conversations, allegations, third parties, even legal documents beyond just my own interactions with her that I won't go into. And there's a lot intentionally and some things perhaps unintentionally that I'm omitting. I'm writing this in the hopes that letting it out, no longer in vague posts, but in a thorough, vulnerable, public way, maybe I won't feel the desire to bring it up again. Maybe I can finally... Last June, I went to a bar down by the courts in Manhattan. I had matched with someone on a dating app earlier that day, and we were supposed to meet. When I got to the bar and I was waiting there, the woman I matched with ended up asking me how much I wanted to pay for her time. To be clear, I'm pro-sex work of all kinds. I think legalizing and regulating it is the best way to combat sex trafficking and grant women, men, and trans folk safety, autonomy, and the ability to capitalize on their sexuality if they so choose. However, I am anti-pretending to be a real user on a dating app only to spring on someone expecting to meet you that you're an escort at the last second. So yeah, I didn't meet with this person and ended up sitting in the largely empty bar alone just before midnight, trying my best to keep a smile as I ordered before going back to my table and weeping silently to myself. My hamster and my dad had died the month before, and I think this was the weekend just before or after his wake. I was virtually homeless at the time, dealing with family issues and panic attacks that landed me in a psych ward for a day. I was feeling deeply suicidal and was craving a night of mutually fulfilling sex just to momentarily soften reality's blow. A woman approached me and invited me to sit with her husband and friends. Long story short, I think these guys were swingers. They were all much older than me, like 40s or 50s. They kept putting their hands all over each other, giving each other back massages and whatnot, to the point where I couldn't figure out whose partner was whose. They were jokey and flirty. One of the women, the one I was most into, would put her hand on my leg as her husband ordered me drink after drink. But then at the end of the night, they ended up just getting in a cab together and leaving while telling me they're usually at the bar every weekend and asking if I might be around to join them again. I wasn't sure at the time because of my situation, which they seemed to take as a rejection. I genuinely think they were trying to gauge my interest in hanging with them to build rapport and eventually ask me to seal the deal. And like, dude, I was so fucking horned up, I would have absolutely jumped on them. Anyway, at one point when the woman I was most into first introduced me to the group, she said something like his ex-girlfriend was a crazy bitch. I had given her a small brief of my situation, saying my ex had schizophrenia, so I wasn't in the best of spirits that night. And I know this woman was just trying to be fun and edgy and have a good time, but hearing someone say that about Q really pissed me off. All this is to say, I'm not making this video to demean or to disparage or to gossip about my ex. I love Q, present tense, and every fucking cell in my body wishes things had gone differently for her individually and for us as friends. Also, please, respectfully, if you feel the need to backseat and say something about codependency or unhealthy this or that, I don't fucking care. My friend is gone, man. I'm not making this video to ask for advice or judgment on her or on myself or on anyone involved, what I or anyone should have or should not have done. Life is ugly sometimes and violently unpredictable. I beat myself up over everything that's happened every single fucking day, and I'll be expressing some of that self-frustration in this video, but explicitly, I'm just trying to describe the ugliness I witnessed and lived through to maybe find some understanding in it, in the hopes that it might help someone recognize the signs if some similar ugly tendrils ever prod into their lives as well. But I don't know how to tell this story. Blandly, predictably, Q and I met on Tinder. This was serendipitous though. In the last 3 years or so of my life, I've been on more dates and had more sex than I've ever had before. Many women and men who don't know each other have separately, unprompted, told me that I'm attractive, I'm hot even, I'm kind, I'm a cool guy, I have a nice dick, to the point where it shocks some people when I tell them how little relationship experience I have. Scientists haven't quite figured out what's going on there. I'm also very much aware of the irony that when I'm at a point in my life where I'm more beaten down and depressed and directionless and financially unstable than I've ever been, I'm having the most luck finding people who want to fuck me. I truly don't know what this says about anything. I can't unpack that right now. To be super ultra perfectly clear, I do have a very nice dick. Sorry, that's not what. To be super ultra perfectly clear, I don't think I'm some kind of hero. I don't even know if I'm that good of a person. I don't like myself very much. I've been very depressed as long as I can remember, and in my depression, I've emotionally burdened and hurt a lot of people who have crossed paths with me. I used to be much worse in my younger years, and I think I've become a better, kinder, less angry, more empathetic person now that I'm in my early 30s. But I'm not someone I think anyone should be looking to as a role model or anything. I think the things I'm sharing also say a lot about me, not all of it good. I think I come across as quite pathetic in a lot of this. There's a lot I regret about what happened and what I did, but I don't for a moment regret being in Q's life and doing everything I could to help her. Somehow, the algorithmic gods over at Tinder matched me with Q. Even more remarkably, she responded. And even more remarkably, we actually met up. I don't believe in God or fate or like astrology, but somehow in the chaotic nonsense of the universe, Q and I found each other, getting close enough despite all odds to leave lasting marks on each other's lives. Q was intelligent, adventurous, clearly a loving person. She'd always talk about going on these long walks all around her neighborhood and beyond. She loved to cook and to bake. She loved music and would always be singing songs to herself, dancing as she cooked. She'd make these little wire dolls and sew clothing for them. The walls of her room were covered with magazine cutouts of alt baddies and fashion models, sheets of poetry and handwritten lyrics from songs she enjoyed, a mood board of non-contiguous, contextless words aligned with one another like a collage of violently erupting streams of consciousness and emotion. Q was part Japanese and she seemed to love the culture. Her bookcase was lined with obscure Japanese graphic novels and East Asian romance novels and memoirs. Our time together was brief but deeply personal, intimate, and meaningful. There's so much more I wanted to learn about her and so much of her life I wish I could have shared. I was fascinated by her, but things felt off from the beginning. The way she texted seemed disjointed and she was immediately suspicious and hostile of me, saying she didn't believe my backstory and saying I was being fake because everyone's a phony. It wasn't until months later that I began to understand this as a sign that she was succumbing to a recurring schizophrenic delusion. Q believed her life was fake, a TV show or film or play or simulation full of NPCs. Sometimes she would liken her life to The Truman Show, some spectacle or performance in which everyone was an actor except for her, and she never got a script. She believed people were always watching, especially in her most intimate moments, to the point where later that year, when we got back together after a long break, she told me that she'd stopped creating her wire dolls and even stopped masturbating because everyone could already see what she was doing. She said she was switched at birth and her family, who lived in a different state, were not her real relatives. She said someone had cursed her a long time ago and hypnotized her, making her think and feel things she never wanted to feel. All of this would trickle out over weeks and months of hanging out, talking, texting, loving each other. If anyone wonders why no one did anything sooner, I think one of the main reasons is that it was so hard to tell what the fuck was going on. Q was never diagnosed as far as I know, though she had spent time in a hospital following a panic attack sometime before I met her. By the time I met her, she'd quit all her jobs and seemingly had no contact with friends or family. To a lot of well-meaning people, I think it would seem like this once caring and vibrant person just turned into an angry and cruel wreck overnight. And our society's hyper-atomized self-care culture, especially in a post-COVID world, likely led a lot of people in her life to cut ties and leave Q to her own devices. Schizophrenia, if that's indeed what Q suffered with, doesn't appear how I thought it would. Q appeared fine on the surface. She could go to the store, go for long walks, go to the movies, order food. She absolutely wasn't a rambling, incoherent mess like we see depicted in so much media. But it was the little things she did and said that painted the fuller picture of a person in deep emotional pain, someone at war with her own mind. For her, it often manifested as numbness and nihilism, an inability or unwillingness to connect with or trust people, and a harsh, off-putting rudeness and at times violent verbal abusiveness that genuinely only an insecure and depressed person, like myself, would have continued to put up with. I'm not sure if the nihilism and meanness was a front or how she really felt, but it collapsed from time to time when she'd suddenly apologize for being mean. It broke when she would smile, give the tightest hugs you've ever felt, and talk about how much fun she had and things she was interested in. It also broke when she cried. I didn't think she was a real person until she walked into that bar the day we met. We talked, we made out, we had sex at her place, and we lied in bed for hours watching movies and Courage the Cowardly Dog. It was incredible. But she started crying as we made love that first night. I worried that something was wrong or that I hurt her somehow, but she brushed it off, going on to give several different excuses. By the way, yes, one of 3 or 4 reasons she gave for why she cried during sex the first time was that my dick was, quote, perfect, and she was crying into the void out of joy. This was mid-conversation where she was basically dumping me out of nowhere, and I still find it genuinely funny. Of course I had to include it in this story. Anyway, later the day we first met, at around midnight, she started crying again while we listened to music on my speaker. She got catatonic and asked me gently to leave. She'd have many, many more of these seemingly random crying fits, and she'd go through phases of telling me she wanted nothing to do with me anymore, that I was a phony, that she only wanted me around for sex, but nothing really mattered. She also wasn't really sure about what she wanted, falling back on, I don't know, when I proposed friendship or casual or just never speaking to each other again. We'd stopped seeing each other for several months but kept in touch sporadically through text where she'd apologize one day for being unkind and rude to me, then tell me the next to go fuck off. At this point, I knew she wasn't working anymore and couldn't pay rent, so I was worried for her, but I was unsure what, on a deeper level, was going on with her. At one point, she says she wants to cut me, put a bag over my head, make it look like I'm dying. At another point, in a depressed and lonely spiral, I asked her if she still wanted to hurt me. In my mind, the pain would be worth it just to see her again. She said yes, saying I could either pay her or let her burn my apartment down. Unsure how to answer, I ghosted her for a bit afterwards. Sometime later, she says she wants to hang out again, with no violence. I told her she was toxic and asked her if she knew if she had schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder or something, because every time I spoke with her, it seemed like she was a different person. She didn't respond. At some point during the summer, I got hard ghosted by like 4 different women on 3 different dating apps. Their accounts were there one moment and gone the next, one disappearing the literal day I was supposed to meet her. Feeling pathetic and isolated, I reached out to Q and took her up on her offer to hang again. I didn't tell any of my friends I was talking to her again. I'd been increasingly isolated from my friends, often not seeing any of my closest friends for months because they live out of state or are just too busy. Many of them I wouldn't even hear from for weeks or months. Besides, none of them knew her or liked her, and if I was making a horrible mistake, I wanted it to be my mistake. We met and she seemed stabler and happier. She was looking for work and answering texts with complete sentences and punctuation, not flitting from thought to thought. She even remarked excitedly to me how she wasn't crying when we listened to music together. We talked about sex and I told her that I'm there as her friend first. If she wanted sex, she could ask when she was ready, but I wouldn't bring it up. She talked about how lonely she was and how worried she was that I hated her. She was being toxic, she said, but I assured her that I was just happy to hear from her. I thought she'd hated me too. And so our relationship for some time was just that, 2 friends spending hours with each other, joking, laughing, drinking in life and connection and happiness. But it was also during this period that the nature of her illness became clearer. This is when she told me about the people watching her, how she stopped being creative and stopped masturbating, how she felt sick knowing people could see her body and wouldn't leave her alone. She'd driven a nail through her phone at some point, hoping to break it so no one could reach out to her. This was when it dawned on me that I was the only person left in her life. She'd cut ties with all her friends, all her family, and through some psychological underflow error, she decided that she wanted to spend time with me despite it all. She seemed stabler, more with it than before, but she shared these anecdotes with a pensiveness that suggested both pain and embarrassment at the possibility of me judging her as crazy. I tried to ask general questions, how these things made her feel, how she coped with these feelings. Now and then I tried to glean more about the paranoia itself, who was watching, how, and why, but she often wouldn't share more than what she did when unprompted. After some time, she received a warning about her impending eviction. I sent her job board postings and asked around for tips on places that might be hiring. I'd buy her food whenever we hung out. I was also looking for housing myself, letting her know that if I found a place, she could crash on my couch if she couldn't find anywhere else. She was grateful for my help at first, but eventually the crying fits resumed and the talk of phonies. She suddenly said she didn't want to see me again. This was when I decided to search online to find her family. I managed to get in touch with her parents and was happy to hear that she had a place to come home to should she accept that. I'd update her parents on her well-being behind the scenes while trying to be as supportive a friend to her as I could when I was with her. Her demeanor would shift several times more, sometimes going from kind and loving to cold and hateful within just a few hours. A few days after saying she wanted nothing to do with me, she asked me if I wanted to sleep over. I figured she either wanted to have sex again or was plotting to kill me. Turns out it was the former, though a different person might not have taken that risk. So our relationship got sexual again, and I should also admit that we were drinking a lot. I drink a lot, some might say unhealthily, I might say unhealthily, and while I don't really smoke weed, she would often drink and almost ceaselessly smoke weed and tobacco. We were wary of how much we consumed and joked about being alcoholics, but it's fair to say we, both of us, were dependent on substances, using them to flush out our inner turmoil. There were times when she lamented how she was killing herself, I think referring to her dependence on weed, alcohol, and tobacco. There is a purported link between heavy weed usage and schizophrenia. For me, doing weed expands whatever I'm feeling, including stress, anxiety, and paranoia. But in a fun way, the feelings become less concentrated, thinner, easier to poke holes through with other emotions, unless I accidentally overdose on 100 milligrams of a gummy, in which case it would lead to my first ever panic attack at my dad's house just 2 or so months before he died. My last memories with him are of him worrying, hoping that I'd be okay as the paramedics took me away. It's been a rough couple of years. One specific study on the connection between weed and psychosis is discussed at length in this article I read in Scientific American. Though I agree with researchers Carl Hart and Charles Ksur, who are quoted in the article that heavy cannabis use itself probably doesn't cause psychosis, but is one of many behaviors that could contribute to one being diagnosed as psychotic. For Q, she took tobacco, she smoked weed, she drank a lot, she slept all the time. I honestly think all of it was the only way she could think to cope with her anxious and lonely mind. I asked her if she had health care and recommended that maybe at some point she should see a therapist. She thought it pointless, expressing a general distrust for doctors and a subtle, recurring nugget of worry that something was wrong with her. We had what I thought was a nice discussion about mental health. I stressed to her that I would always be there for her, but a professional might be able to help in ways or at times that I couldn't. I was hoping to have more talks like this with her, trying to push her to get evaluated and eventually diagnosed and medicated. But those conversations would never come. It was a balancing act of trying to be her friend, trying to be her lover, and trying to be a supporter. A balancing act that I definitely didn't manage perfectly. I was scared of saying the wrong thing to her, triggering her delusion, and making her never want to see me again. And that was, to me, the scariest thing of all, because if I wasn't there, who was going to help her? We spent one more weekend together, the best, most magical weekend of my life. We explored abandoned buildings, took photos, took videos, had sex unprotected because we'd forgotten to pack condoms and she didn't want to wait a second longer. It was my first time ever doing that, both unprotected and in an abandoned building. And it was transcendent. We were the only ones there, so it felt like we owned each space, had them all to ourselves. At one point, rain spattered onto our heads through the collapsed roofs, but neither of us wanted to stop. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but I really like rain and water in general, so this was like a transformative experience for me. That's why any game that has rain in it gets an immediate 10 out of 10 from me. Resident Evil 2 Remake, boom, 10 out of 10. Metal Gear Solid 2, boom, 10 out of 10. The Last of Us Part 2, we had a picnic with sandwiches and treats that we spent the whole prior night preparing. We drank beers, ate sandwiches, then caught the ferry back just in time for a chilly but gorgeous sunset. Everything felt tuned and timed just right. Back at her place, we enjoyed the rest of the night and next morning together. Memories so golden, they're etched permanently into my soul. She'd gone to bed that night somewhat delirious, flitting erratically from subject to subject, which she'd do from time to time. In the morning, she held her back awkwardly. I asked if her back was hurting, and she looked at me with concern, asking how I knew, if I hypnotized her in her sleep. The line between is she joking and is she serious was difficult for me to balance on. It seems that this time she was seriously worried that I might have hypnotized her in her sleep, as she thought had been done to her by others in the past. I cried when I left her apartment Sunday morning because I knew it would happen again. The paranoia, the talk of phonies, the isolation. And it did. Just a few hours later, as I attended an open house for an apartment in the Bronx, she told me she felt lonely and done. She said, as she had many times before, that she'd rather die than get evicted, that it felt like her life was just for everyone else's entertainment. I'd spoken to some 988 crisis counselors for advice on how to help her, one of whom said, as I understood it, to validate her feelings without playing into the delusions, redirect and ask her questions about how she felt and why, so I did. But as the conversation continued to sour, I told her I'd give her some space. It was painful because despite the things she might have said, telling me she hated me or wanted me to die, hearing from her felt better than silence. At least if she was still talking, there was a connection there and more chances to reason with her and get her help. For the next few days, I didn't hear from her. I tried calling mobile crisis centers through 988 to ask for more advice on what to do for her. I planned to schedule a psychologist to visit her, but without her permission, I was told she wouldn't have to open the door for them. So I just waited in anxious, suffocating silence until one day, at work, I start receiving frantic emails from her, asking if I stole her SNAP benefits money. She was clearly panicked and upset. Emailing back and forth, I told her I didn't steal her money, but I'd head over after work to help replace it and get her groceries. When I got there, she opened the door with a dazed expression on her face. There was glass shattered all over her apartment floor and blood on her palms. I asked her what happened and she broke down, crying. She was catatonic, weeping, "Nobody loves me," as she curled into herself on her chair. I went to her bathroom to find swabs to clean her hands. There was vomit in her bathtub and the scattered shards of her bong in there too. I tried to clean her hand, but she didn't want me to touch her. I asked if she wanted me to call an ambulance, and she returned, "Why would I want that?" Eventually, I convinced her to leave the house and get some air. We got her groceries, a new vape, and money to replace what she lost. She told me she downed a bottle of liquor earlier and blacked or browned out, losing most of her memory. She shattered the glass and might have spilled WD-40 trying to burn down the apartment. She shared more about her delusions, saying how angry she was when people didn't understand her and how lonely she felt that no one came to help her. I told her I would have if I had known. I tried naively to tell her that I don't know if I'm a real person, I can't prove it, but I've shown that I want to be there for her, and if I'm an actor, she should at least let me be the one on her side. She seemed to cheer up during this walk. When we got back, we cleaned some of the glass from the floor, got ready to make burgers and fries for dinner, and I secretly let her parents know what happened and that I was with her. But over the remainder of the night, she grew visibly depressed again, and angry when I stupidly pushed back on her delusions, asking for proof that her world wasn't real. She yelled at me, saying I could either get on her level or get out. So I apologized and held my tongue. I noticed her facial expression sinking and that she was getting quiet again, so I tried to keep up the conversation. I even pulled up Baldur's Gate 3 on my laptop to show her how cool it was, but nothing perked her up again, not even Baldur's Gate 3. About an hour later, she told me she didn't trust me, that it seemed like I was trying to trap her by looking for housing. I tried to reason with her, saying I didn't want her to be homeless and asking if she had another plan. She screamed at me to leave, throwing a glass cup to the floor which shattered on impact. In a rush of fear and adrenaline, both for her future and my safety, I pleaded with her to reconsider, refusing to leave until she told me what she would do if she got evicted. This escalated to a full-blown fight. She'd went into her room and I stepped in after her, asking her what she planned to do if she kicked me out. Then she turned and started punching me, screaming for me to get out. I held her wrist, trying to hold back her hands from hitting me. She started biting me and we wrestled, yelling over each other, slamming into things, dropping things. When I let go, I was afraid to turn my back because I thought she might grab a knife and stab me. Later, as I stood by her front door, she punched me in the face over and over and even started choking me. To be super blunt about this, because I understand domestic violence is most often perpetrated by men against women and frequently leads to women's deaths, I'm not some helpless little puppy. Aside from potentially stabbing me or pouring water on my laptop, which she tried to do, I knew there was very little she could have done to injure me in any lasting way. I was scared, afraid to turn around, as I said, or walk past her to grab my backpack. She told me in the past she wanted to cut me and make me look like I was dying, and now there she was, trying to hurt me as much as she could, with knives and broken glass all around. But there were moments toward the end when I was egging her on, telling her to keep hitting me, keep choking me, and I don't know for the life of me what the hell I was thinking, because she did it repeatedly. I think by that point it felt like all was lost. I couldn't reason with her, so in desperation I told her there was one thing I'd been keeping secret from her, that I'd been talking to her parents, hoping to give her another way out if she couldn't trust me anymore. She grew angrier, rejecting them, hurling accusations about them, and screaming with betrayal. So as she continued to scream and strike me, I think I gave in. I got caught up in the excitement and wanted to show her that I wasn't scared, that all her threats and flailing and bluster couldn't hurt me, even if, in truth, it hurt deeper than I realized at the time. I've called this altercation abuse in the past, and I'm honestly not sure if it amounts to that. Not legally, mind you, but morally. There was definitely emotional abuse in our relationship, all the hot and cold, her calling me pathetic for saying I enjoyed spending time with her, saying she wanted to cut me and burn my house down. But physical abuse feels like this big, ugly, specific thing, and I'm not sure that this fight amounts to it. As I said, I'm not here to cast judgment on any of this, so I don't care to affix a label, but I just also don't want to diminish those who have been abused and feel my experience doesn't compare. It's why I don't like claiming these weighty labels in general. Eventually, we'd reached what I thought was a breakthrough. The yelling stopped, and she told me that if I wouldn't leave, I could at least help her find her vape, which she'd been searching around the apartment for. I was hopeful then that in the quiet we could talk things through, figure out where to go from here. Then, a knock on the door. The police, called by Q's neighbors who overheard the commotion. The police asked if I lived there. I said no. They instructed me to leave. Outside, I cried heaving tears like I'd never felt before. I showed the officer the bite marks on my hand and arms. I screamed, if she kills herself, I don't know what I'm going to do. The police did nothing. They spoke to her, they got back in their car, they left. I cried on the phone with Q's mom that night on the walk back home. I apologized for the bear hug, realizing in all the commotion that it made things worse and I could have inadvertently hurt her. And I apologized for failing their family. I'd never cried so hard in my entire fucking life. I went to the precinct the next day asking for a copy of the incident report. After making me wait unattended for about 30 minutes, still sore from the beating, they eventually told me that they didn't write a report. The call was dismissed as a domestic incident where nothing happened. I gestured helplessly and confusedly to the bite marks. If I wanted a report, the officer said I needed to press charges. I didn't want to press charges. I wanted to help this person. I've harbored a great deal of animus toward the systems in place that I feel allowed this to happen, allowed Q to dig herself into this hole of isolation and self-destruction. But I don't want this video to be about that. Feeling numb, hurt, and dizzy, I missed work that day. Still dizzy the day after, I went to urgent care and the doctor determined that I likely suffered a mild concussion from the hits I took to the head. Through all of it though, the emotional pain was worse. More drama would ensue and the saga would continue in uneasy anticlimax for several more months. I tried reaching out to Q, offering her support and friendship, and she eventually replied indirectly saying in no certain terms she wanted nothing to do with me. It hurts thinking she could hate me so much that she'd rather go homeless than to talk to me again. I can only imagine her family must have felt so much worse. Imagining her suffering the bitter cold of this year's huge winter storms has brought me to tears, but one of my biggest fears through this saga was that something might happen to her. She was young, attractive, mentally unwell, socially isolated, and desperate, with no money, job, or support network, and miles away from her nearest family. She had a history of risky work and behavior. In other words, she was the textbook kind of woman who might end up getting kidnapped, trafficked, exploited, stuck in a cult, or trapped in an abusive relationship. Hearing about the vile behavior disgusting pigs like Tectone perpetrated on their partners makes me sick, and my mind on its own worries of it happening to her. The dumb irony is that in her mind, she probably thought that I was that man, that I was her abuser, hurting, gaslighting, and hypnotizing her, along with everyone else who once loved and cared for her. At the beginning of this year, Q was finally evicted. I don't know where she is or even if she's still alive. I hope she found reason and made the right choice to help herself, but honestly, part of me really deeply believes that she's dead. That she killed herself, as she said she might. Every now and then my sight lingers on the small discolored oval of skin on my right bicep where the bite mark Q left me never healed quite right. I don't know how to tell this story. The central antagonistic force of the medium is a creature named the Maw. The game never tells you its name, by the way. As far as I know, you only learn this through subtitles, which, I don't know, I guess horror games do that a lot, but it creates this unintentional effect where either subtitles kill some of the intrigue and mystery, or you, in keeping that intrigue, have some difficulty understanding what Mr. Troy Baker is saying. I think Mr. Troy Baker's performance as the Maw is one of the best performances in the game. A lot of the other vocal performances feel like they're over the top and unnatural. Marianne, the main character, feels in contrast very boring and annoying given just how much she talks in the game. Like she literally comments on every single thing you interact with, often pointing out themes, connections, and puzzle answers that the player very well could have gleaned on their own.
There were some kids here.
And a lot of it is written with this try-hardy poeticism, like it always has to be trying to say something bigger than itself.
Some things don't just go away. They stick. They echo.
Why would he care any more than the others?
It's more than grief. More than despair. This letter crushed her spirit.
The Maw instead feels authentic, and several of its voice lines as it stalks Marianne get quite unsettling in context. The Maw is a creature born from the shame and trauma of a character named Lillian, or Lily, who was raped as a child by Richard, a man partially responsible for looking after her. The Maw, being an extension of Lily's sense of fear, shame, and powerlessness, finds people to wear as a skin suit, what I believe to be a metaphor for rape, and in doing so possesses them to commit acts of violent murder.
So it's true. The Neva massacre.
As you hear the Maw describe what it wants to do to Marianne, how it wants to violate and use her, we approach moments of genuine horror. The imagery is grotesque, and the Maw feels like an internalization of that pain.
No! No!
Don't leave me here. Alone. Naked. Let me try you on.
The problem is, when we turn the Maw's all-consuming violence into such a bold metaphor for Lily's assault, it creates several side effects. One, Lily is not in control of this thing. It just sprang from her, and the degree of its violence is constantly remarked by Marianne and other characters to be greater and far more powerful than any of the other ghosts or creatures we see.
I'd never felt darkness like that before. That thing had been there. It was where it made its first kill, where it tasted death and liked it. That thing. It was anything but normal. I've never encountered anything like this. This ravenous.
This transforms the commentary into this almost retroactive victim blaming. Lily doesn't ever get to be a subject. She really doesn't get to decide things or perform any agency. She's reduced to her trauma, characterized as a flailing, destructive force of nature causing nothing but pain for everything around her. I can't help but feel like the world treated Q the same. When she spoke of violence, when she told people to die, when she attacked me, it was easy to think that there was no longer a person under there. How much of it was her and how much of it was her illness? I, perhaps naively, attribute a great deal to Q's illness, thinking there's a beautiful, caring human being under there who would thrive and bring good into the world if we could just get her out. Others, perhaps coldly, write her off, not acknowledging the line between Q and her illness, if one even exists, and thus laying the sole responsibility on her. I try to plead with others, explaining to them we're really not as in control of our minds as we like to think. What'll happen to you when your memory starts to fade, when your mental inhibitors degrade, if illness thoroughly corrodes your regulatory and decision-making systems? From the moment I began understanding what was going on, when I first reached out to Q's family, I understood a community would be necessary to help her heal. Friends like myself, neighbors, family, and government systems, even kind nudges from strangers. The world is so atomized, isolated, and self-interested, but I thought if care coalesced around her like a warm blanket, we could insulate her from society's cold. As I felt that community separate and crumble, I grew scared for Q and angry at the world for noticing her and looking the other way. I wrote this poem, Everyman. There's no community here, just a writhing, itching swell of flesh. Senseless, with tattoos reading lonely and scared unintelligibly, running in tiny, incessant loops along its limbs, sweat slick and pale. Some called it she when it was around, still reaching and babbling, making a mess of things, whatever came too near. Once I got close enough to see it, to read, to hold it even, to recall, but I wasn't strong enough to pull it free. I'm sorry. In my anger, my struggle to understand what was happening, I'd done the same thing as the medium, reducing a person to their worst impulses, to their most antisocial tendencies, their most destructive acts. I used this dehumanizing metaphor intentionally to represent how I felt others had characterized and dismissed Q, not bothering to acknowledge her as a full person. It's why I used the pronoun it instead of she, but this pale, animalistic and perhaps infantile characterization, it's coming from me, isn't it? How much agency did I deny Q in my blind, desperate, and reckless attempts to help her, especially as I kept reaching out to see if she was okay? I really wish I were playing Resident Evil Requiem right now. Resident Evil Requiem, or Resident Evil 9, the Q is supposed to be the 9. It's really clever, like how the VILL in Resident Evil Village is supposed to be the 8. I genuinely really hope they continue this naming convention, like forever. Resident Evil Execution. Resident Evil Ohio. Anyway, Requiem was released by Capcom earlier this year, 2026, and it's an incredible game that blends traditional, slow-paced, scary time survival horror with the quicker, more bombastic action horror set pieces of a game like Resident Evil 4. And it does it so fucking well. The whole thing's got this vaguely Metal Gear Solid 4 energy, and I wouldn't be surprised if that were some level of inspiration, considering as far back as I've been playing Resident Evil, it's always been somewhat inspired by Metal Gear. You play separately as Leon Kennedy, Raccoon City and therefore Resident Evil veteran, and Grace Ashcroft, a new character in the franchise. Resident Evil has almost always had multiple characters with differing scenarios and playstyles, but this game in particular blends two drastically different gameplay modes with an unconventional narrative pace that feels both fresh and extremely intelligible for the story. The main antagonist, Victor Gideon, performed by Anthony Byrne, affects this Dark Knight Joker cadence and assumes an imposing but restrained presence as he talks gently but towers over those around him. He serves really well to carry the drama forward.
I've done it. I've done it.
We've still got the narrow corridors with maze-like structures, esoteric puzzles, and unpredictable enemies, creating a sense of risk and reward as you plan or improvise exploration routes while playing as Grace. Her sections prime you to be wary of every corner, but utilize an insanely diverse enemy variety and other seemingly random chance events to throw emergent obstacles and environmental puzzles in your way as you make progress. But there's also a lot of space for Leon sections for focused set pieces which keep you tense, not out of mortal fear, but out of the excitement of panic and insecurity as you explore vaster areas and enemies and continually ramp up pressure to match your growing arsenal. Leon's sections are more linear, but let you play out a power fantasy which decreases in potency as the narrative closes. But yeah, whatever. All that's cool and all, but I honestly just need an excuse to talk about Grace. Grace Ashcroft is cute as a bean. She's vaguely autistic coded, I think, especially early on. She doesn't do well talking to people, avoids eye contact most of the time, is hyper-focused on her given projects at work, and her fear and trauma is portrayed with so much reality, deep humanity, and earnestness, which is incredibly surprising for a franchise that's often played as an action blockbuster with campy dialogue and characters who often meet the horrors with anger and bombast rather than terror. The performance here by Angela Santalbano, I think that's Italian? The performance here is absolutely masterful and unlike any I expected to get from a Resident Evil game.
Mom, I feel like I'm gonna throw up.
Grace, look at me. Grab my hands. Okay, look at me. In and out. Breathe in and out.
I love you too. Mom, I'm scared.
No. We need to find a way out of here now.
But we don't have any of our stuff, Mom.
We can come back for it later, Grace.
This translates to gameplay where you'll hear Grace's breathing get stunted and agitated when near enemies or certain stimuli. You'll even see Grace's hands tremble as she aims her gun. And with that comes moments of relative calm when Grace is with the child Emily and feels more secure, more stable. But anyway, Requiem's not a psychological horror experience like Silent Hill or The Medium, so there's nothing too deep or philosophical about the human psyche to uncover. Well, actually no, that's not true. We will be talking about Requiem here, so buckle up. Spoiler alert for the ending of Resident Evil Requiem. Resident Evil Requiem's ending presents you with an indirect moral choice. Should Grace destroy the compounds produced by Spencer of Resident Evil 1 Spencer Mansion fame, or release it, potentially plaguing the world with a virus worse than what's already been unleashed? Resident Evil games often have this sort of choice in them, but I'm not used to them being so in your face. I feel usually like the player's given a more subtle choice earlier in the game, which leads them on a separate ending path to a good or bad ending later. Comparatively, the morality of the choice in Requiem is obvious. In hindsight. I say in hindsight because for some reason I chose destruction my first time through, and I knew that wasn't the right answer, if not because I was properly following the game's emotional hints, then because Resident Evil always prioritizes positive catharsis over nihilism in its narratives. Resident Evil wants the player to choose hope, to choose to believe humanity can be cured of its dormant ills, of its resident evils, if enough people demonstrate enough courage, grit, selflessness, community, and determination. Grace is emblematic of that. Hell, it's in her name. It's revealed that her mother, Alyssa, adopted her, caring for her in Spencer's stead before his death, and eventually giving her own life to protect her, to protect the vision of a brighter tomorrow. And Grace carries that hope into the new generation through her selfless care for Emily. Hope is such an underappreciated human emotion. It's important for the big stuff. I can only imagine how much hope a person might need to muster perseverance in the face of genocide in Palestine and in the Sudan, and the brutal, senseless war in Ukraine and Iran and other places. I know firsthand the hope necessary to live paycheck to paycheck, scrounging together coins to get food, not knowing if you'll have a shelter in a few weeks, while the people who purport to care for you and speak for you burn billions of dollars to maim children and protect pedophiles and murder and terrorize their own citizenry among other innocent people. But hope can be quieter. When you like someone and you're waiting for them to text you back, there's hope there, right? When you're planning a trip back home to visit friends and family, is there hope there? It's a sort of urgent and uncomfortable, but vaguely positive, expectant longing for a specific future, one in which things are better than they are at present. And hope is so fundamentally human. Without it, we're left with just the cold, rapid thrumming of a machine churning on rhythmically, predictably, but without care and without purpose.
I'll hold it off for as long as I can.
I'm not leaving you.
You can't always save everyone, butterfly. Trust me, I know.
The medium with its refrain, "You can't save everyone," well, it would love to kill that hope, wouldn't it? It's neater and easier to cut people loose. It creates a nice, impactful ending you can fit into a bag and set aside. It would have been a much more defined and empowering close to my story if I'd just protected my peace, as it were, and let Q go when things first seemed off. Certainly when the symptoms started showing again, and absolutely after our fight. It would have been morally easier thinking that it wasn't my fault, that no matter what I or her parents or anyone had done or could have done differently, nothing would have changed the outcome for her.
You can't always save everyone, butterfly.
Grace's sections of Requiem play and feel a bit like The Last of Us, with enemies walking various patrol paths. These paths are often dynamic and can change depending on scenario and the player's actions, but what I wasn't expecting and found incredibly interesting was why certain zombies would take certain paths. Some of the zombies are still seemingly conscious and will repeat certain refrains related to their roles or emotions prior to the virus taking effect. The cook will linger in the kitchen, looking for meat to chop for a meal that'll never come. A maid will find messes left by others and, with singular focus, will drop to her knees and clean blood and viscera from the floor. An opera singer will continue to sing and cackle. In general, I wish these were even more dynamic. There were several times I experimented, luring the opera singer to the same space as a patient who became violent when exposed to noise. I expected them to interact, maybe with the patient lashing out or become stunned by the singer, but to my knowledge that wasn't possible. Enemies in Resident Evil are capable of dealing damage to each other, and there's a lot of fun chaos to be had with these systems, especially in Leon sections, but it didn't seem possible to use the enemy's traits against each other. Still, it was so compelling to see these zombies succumb to their routine, their identity subsumed by whatever their final role was before their humanity faded, the vestiges of a failing mind. It's genuinely horrifying, and my experience with Q and with my own frequent panic attacks make me so much more aware and terrified of how fragile our connection to our present reality really is. How much does it take for a person to lose themselves, to lose their understanding of what's real, and what sense of me will my mind hold on to when that day inevitably comes. One of the most tragic lines in the game comes in the basement section of Rhodes Hill, where several zombies are transferred on a conveyor belt to a meat grinder so their blood can be harvested. Grace carefully navigates the area, and just before reaching the grinder, one of the zombies moans. The cracking, zombified voice, the distress, the broken syntax, the existential and interrogative nature, it reminds me of the itchy, tasty line from Resident Evil 1. It's one of few moments in any Resident Evil game where you're really called to sit there and think about the lost humanity of these creatures and the infinite and unyielding pain of internal dissolution. The medium exists in a world that would rather not consider this. You can't save everyone. Some people, through no fault of their own, become those Requiem zombies, rabid and ugly, lashing with instinctual violence like a senseless biological machine, simply running until its energy fades. They don't intend their cruelty because really, they aren't people anymore. They are already dead and you can't save them. No one can. There's no use hoping. There's no use waiting. Grace is messy and anxious and stressful. It's neater, quieter, and better to stifle the destructive flailing early on. It's neater, quieter, and better to cut them loose. There's no cure for their ills, and the mess they've made cannot be cleaned. And what's more,
You can't always save everyone, butterfly.
it is easier to imagine Q as a writhing, itching swell of flesh, making a mess of things. We don't go back to consider the humanity of the Requiem zombies who sing and bemoan the light and the noise. We avoid them or put them down, then press on to help those we find more endearing, those with stories to tell. One of my biggest issues with Requiem is how quickly it wraps up Emily's story. More specifically, that it doesn't let us save her. I mean, technically we do through our actions in the story, but her reconciliation is handled largely off-screen and feels less cathartic as a result. Emily is a girl blinded by experimentation and raised as a test subject. She's one of many attempts to clone Grace, who was believed to be unique in her ability to unleash Spencer's research on the world. Over the course of the game, Grace and Emily become close, and the player works to keep Emily safe from the enemies exploring the world, especially one creature named the Girl, another failed clone. For a while, it seems that Emily won't be another victim of Resident Evil side character syndrome. And for those who don't know what that is, well...
Shit's fired up. Reach for me! God damn it! Hey, put that door back! Put that door back! Wait! Are you listening? Hey!
But after a helicopter crash, Emily sustains some injuries and her virus rebounds, causing her to mutate. When she becomes a monster and we as Leon are forced to put her down, there's a long period devoid of contemplation, flitting to the next plot point, an almost anxious refusal to answer who Emily was on a personal level and why her individual story mattered. It's like her monstrous transformation overshadowed what came before, and the game then moved on to more important things. I kept wishing for a post-credits sequence where we'd play as Grace, stepping into the ruins of the water treatment facility and inject Emily with the cure ourselves, to hear a word from Emily as she healed. Instead, Emily's resolution is relegated to 2 brief flashing stills and a few lines of dialogue. In this way, victims can sometimes be treated more like props than people, like children being carried along by the whims of society and nature. I'm guilty of this, for sure, and the medium, well...
Shh, here she comes. Guys? Come on, it's dark in here. This isn't funny.
Replaying the game, I still think it handles discussing Lily's rape in a really weird way. The narrative is caked in layers upon layers of metaphor. Like Lily with the maw, Richard, who raped Lily, has the Childeater, his own inner demon that the game heavily suggests is the distinct entity which compelled him to assault Lily Ann. But the game expresses all this with such vagueness that it comes across as cowardly.
Tell me you didn't hurt her, Richard. Thomas, please. Tell me I'm wrong, Richard. Tell me, and I'll let you go.
It wasn't me. Thomas, you have to understand. There's a sting inside of me.
Shut up.
It's important to understand that the medium doesn't do subtlety. This is partly because Marianne literally comments on everything you interact with, denying the player the chance to draw their own thematic and emotional connections lots of the time. But also, true to the game's name, Marianne is a spirit medium who can help lingering spirits pass into the next life, whatever that is. To do this, she just needs their name and sometimes their face. But Marianne doesn't know anything about these people. She's finding bits and pieces of their lives and drawing incredibly far-reaching conclusions about their personalities, their relationships, and the people around them from the snippets of their lives that she finds.
Don't call me Victoria. You know I hate that.
Victoria. That was her given name. But not the real one. Not to her.
We have no idea if Marianne is a reliable narrator in this regard because the spirit sending always works, and there's no other force or authority to check her work. So with the game's pacing and already sluggish momentum, like I'll play for an hour and it'll feel like 3, the game doesn't have the luxury of exploring these people in any real depth. The game doesn't have the luxury of subtlety.
I'm really happy to hear from you. Why didn't you call sooner? You did? But Eugene, that slippery son of a bitch.
Ellie. She was very special to her. You don't need to be a medium to see it. So, if you were talking to Ellie, that means... Tori. It's you. The real you. That's your name. It made sense, really. A name is more than what everyone calls you. It's what you feel yourself to be.
But that makes the vagueness surrounding Richard's actions feel even more frustrating. His vibes were off. Something stirred inside him. What have I done? What did you do?
I didn't mean to. Oh, God. What have I done?
Did you do it?
This man is Thomas, Lily Ann's and later revealed to be Marianne's father. And he yells at Richard and punches Richard, but at no point does he or his alternate self say, "You raped my fucking daughter, you disgusting freak." I understand that the game is suggesting that Thomas, being her father, is reluctant to admit the severity of what happened because it makes him uncomfortable, so he repeatedly refers to it as Lily being hurt.
When Richard hurt her, it awoke something inside her.
But because we only ever learn about what happened through Thomas and Richard, it comes across as the game's reluctance to talk, like it's softening the blow. And I'm wondering why? Why all the metaphor and held tongues? Why is this thing misleadingly named the Childeater? And why only in the subtitles and never spoken out loud? There's a long sequence after finding out what happened to Lily, where we play as Thomas and uncover Richard's childhood. Richard has a crush on Rose, a Jewish girl during World War II. Richard's real father dies serving for Poland during the war, and Richard's new stepfather is an angry, abusive drunk who rapes Richard's mother.
Get away from me, you bastard! No! No! No!
I'd forgotten about this moment, but the game really makes you sit in the discomfort of hearing this woman wail in horror as she's assaulted. There is almost nothing subtle about this sequence. Just to illustrate how unsubtle this is, sometime after the assault, Richard's mother sells the stepfather out, accusing him as a traitor harboring Jews for which he's executed. The same thing happens to Rose, who was taken by Gestapo. The game shows us a bed of literal actual roses, which die as childhood Richard yells, "Oh no, she's dead!" Like, come the fuck on. Is this symbolism, I wonder?
Gross! No! Please, wake up! Wake up!
So, like, why was Richard afforded vagueness and intimation when his abusive father wasn't? Why was Richard given the grace of doubt when there's none anywhere else? And I genuinely think it's because the game is attempting to excuse Richard's actions as something well outside of his control. In the game's universe, Richard didn't do anything wrong. He was a victim too. Did we tell you his father was a drunk? It's this dehumanizing compartmentalization separating an individual thrice between their personhood, their trauma, and their violent actions that makes the medium feel so gross. In this almost mathematical equation, we can see exactly, neatly, where the individual ends and the evil begins. And in the process, it creates this disgusting false equivalence between Lillian, who was raped at 13, and the man who raped her. It's made worse by the game painting Lillian and Marianne by extension as the archetype of a messiah filled with unyielding kindness and grace, even in the face of extreme temptation. It creates this through line that broken people, through no fault of their own, are a danger and should sacrifice themselves for the betterment of everyone else.
Father knew my powers were too dangerous. He left you at the hospital so you could have a normal life.
And what about you? Did he try to?
No. Maybe he should have.
As someone who legitimately hates himself and constantly feels like a burden on others, that is a shitty fucking thing to be told. There's also a very long conversation to be had about how, because of the game's framing, the game entirely centers Thomas's and Richard's feelings about the assault over Lily's. Lily only gets one cutscene of dialogue, not including the flashbacks or cutscenes with Sadness or the Maw, and she never brings up the assault. Which, to be clear, if she were a real person, that would be her choice. A person shouldn't be forced to talk about their traumas or reduced to the sum of their worst ones. That said, Lily isn't real. This is a narrative choice meant to make her uncomplicated, invisible. Her role is to forgive and to be sacrificed.
All those people died so that we could live. Because I lived, so did my demons.
She's there begging for death, saying her decisions only caused pain and suffering, and that maybe her father should have just killed her instead of locking her away. The game manufactures so much consent for overriding her wants and needs, her humanity. I mean, Marianne outright says, maybe this isn't your choice, maybe this is my story.
Marianne, please, I don't want
Maybe
this.
it's not your choice. Maybe this is my story after all.
Lily isn't the center of her own drama, and everyone knows it. Then we add the final theme to that equation, the
You can't always save everyone, butterfly.
It implies that after trauma, a person's growth becomes stagnant. Their real self is forever preserved as a child, unable to grow or mature. That child is the everyone that cannot be saved, and there's no more to them outside of that, nothing else worth scrutinizing. It's a bleak understanding of people and agency, and it's a trap I try, but perhaps fail, to avoid falling into myself. There's a creator on YouTube who goes by the handle Yamu. She's a young woman who looks to be in her 20s and who posts openly about being homeless and suffering with psychosis. I first found her channel from the video Life with Homelessness and Schizophrenia, which is the most viewed video on her channel at the time of writing. Keep that in mind. I personally can't watch these. They make me feel uneasy knowing just how much proximity I had to someone who might be going through something similar. That's not a dig at Yamu at all. I think it's very brave and meaningful that she's sharing this journey. What's more is I feel there's a degree of voyeurism and maybe even fetishization of Yamu among those who watch her. That video, Life with Homelessness and Schizophrenia, is a very important message about humanity and empathy, but it starts off with her dressed in a lolly outfit dancing to kawaii anime music in what looks to be a public restroom. Again, I don't say any of this as a dig at Cyber Yamu. She seems like a nice enough person and can dress however the fuck she wants. She's not hurting anyone. This is just more a critique of the audience that video garnered. Looking through the comments, there's an unreasonable amount of hate, calling her a narcissist and a welfare queen promoting mental illness. But ignoring that weird shit, I think there's a reason that video went viral and now has over 300,000 views, where her next most popular video hasn't even cracked a third of that. I think a lot of people, probably older men to be honest, came here for the cute, vulnerable white girl dancing of it all and couldn't care less for her or her situation. I think it also plays into digital slacktivism, where we feel that just by viewing, liking, and subscribing, we're making a tangible difference in someone's life. And I don't know, I'll come back to that point. I clicked on that video, Life with Homelessness and Schizophrenia, because it was recommended to me around the time that Q got evicted. I thought it might be her, and I was desperate for some sign that she was still alive. When I first started that video, it left me with a pit in my stomach to the point where I couldn't watch it all the way through. I'd missed the incredibly important message it was trying to convey, and so I'll play that message at the end of this section. Also, tragically, by her own admission, this girl is terminally online. I know I can always click on not interested, but A, sometimes that doesn't work, and B, I don't know, it feels mean. Like I only ever do that for creators I find actually offensive, like when thinly veiled racism or misogyny pops up in my feed, usually from the typical anti-woke types or rage bait slop channels. But again, Cyber Yamu seems like a decent person, and even if I feel discomfort due to my specific experience, I always think twice before permanently Xing someone out like that, even if I don't know them personally. Cyber Yamu's channel, her story is not for me to judge. In one of her latest videos at the time of writing, she talks about how happy she is that she'll receive disability pay and finally be able to live outside of a homeless shelter. In a recent post, she speaks of the joy of being out in the real world, outside of psychiatric care. I don't know how she had a phone, by the way. When I was in a psych ward, they took mine away. She lives in Canada, I believe, based on the way she talks, so her specific situation and relevant government safety nets might be more robust than in the United States. But also, this is a reason why we should have government systems that better take care of people like her, and like Q, and so many others, so they can get back on their feet and live a life full of joy, fulfillment, and comfort like everyone else. I'm a black man, if you haven't noticed, and I've personally seen maybe hundreds of people over the course of my life who look like me and suffer debilitating homelessness and mental illness just in New York City alone. I think the fact that I saw the video thumbnail and thought it might be Q speaks to just how common this kind of story might be, how we as a society should do better to address it. There is a quote I saw from the creator The Financial Diet on YouTube. Everyone wants a village, but no one wants to be a villager. In the video, she discusses how we all want and rely on support networks when we need other support, but we generally don't like putting in that effort for others unless it's absolutely necessary. And I felt that firsthand over the last few years. It's not easy, but we should all exist in a community that looks out for these people, not just because statistically it provides better outcomes for society as a whole, but really because it's just the right thing to do. We should all care more about each other and not take each other in our current situations for granted, because everyone needs help at some point, and for some, getting that help can be the difference between life or death. I think there's a tendency among people, especially leftists, to talk about the world and people and societal problems like mental health, poverty, dating, loneliness, and even racism with a heady intellectual distance, as though they're removed from it, sometimes above it. It's all statistics and studies and old texts. And often I appreciate the necessity of that, especially in an increasingly post-truth political climate. But sometimes I think raw stories are just as meaningful. Even if they're messy and don't provide answers, there's value in just expressing the ugly day-to-day humanity of life now and then. When Legal Eagle goes on his multi-million subscriber channel and cries over the heinous execution of Alex Preddy by the hands of Trump's ICE Gestapo, that sort of thing matters. To many people, this isn't academic. It's a world they have to live in. It's nice to see that Cyber Yamu has some hope and a promise of a better tomorrow. I wish her well, and it makes me think that maybe it's possible that Q's still kicking and things will get better for her someday. She'll recover and lead a new life, one I won't be a part of, but one worthy of the beautiful and amazing person that I knew. Cyber Yamu's channel is not for me, but if she can amass a following, maybe even earn revenue of her channel, and really build something for herself, taking control of her illness and her story, and wielding that agency to better her life, then who am I, who is anyone, to deny her that? One of the biggest decisions with Q I regret is not calling the ambulance the day of our fight. I asked her and she said no. Maybe if I did it anyway, things might have gone differently. Maybe she'd still hate me, but they'd have evaluated her, made things better in the long run. But I've been in a psych ward before. It was awful. I felt like an invalid, a poor wretch removed from society because I was deemed unfit for it. They put me in the same space as a teenager who choked his mother earlier that day. I was harassed by the other patients and ignored or talked down to by the nurses, made to feel irrational, subhuman, and unworthy of making my own choices. And a tiny little voice in my heart kept prodding me, saying, maybe I belong here. Looking back toward the medium, characters like Lillian are made feeble, almost invisible, swept along by the harsh tides of others' wills, because to grant them agency, to grant them choice, would be to make them troublesome, harder to understand, more complex, more human. Instead, Lily is ostracized from other kids. She's bullied, she's raped, then tortured by the maw, then nearly burned alive, then trapped by her own father in an isolation cell. The only decisions we see her make are at the behest of others, and both come with extreme consequences. Lily, as a child, sometime after her assault, chooses to release the maw in order to save her little sister Marianne from the blaze that destroyed their home.
We can show them. We can make them understand. Make them feel what it's like.
But I can't leave her here. She'll die.
Good. Remember, Mommy? It's all her fault.
No, she's my sister.
Then set me free, and I will save you both.
Then, at the end of the game, Lillian chooses to let Marianne kill her to stop them all.
It all ends in me.
But... no! No!
You can't send a spirit away while the host is still alive. That's why you couldn't destroy the monster.
That's it. This point's been brought up before by YouTuber MertKK, but there are a few parallels to be drawn between the characters of Lillian and Angela from Silent Hill 2. I always need to preface talking about Silent Hill 2 by saying that the original game is an absolute horror classic, and it's drenched in symbolism, analogy, and metaphor. I'm no Silent Hill lore expert. Everything I know is based on the several playthroughs I've done and the odd video analysis here and there. I'm not scouring the wikis and subreddits reading up on theories. As I understand it, Silent Hill 2 is about 3 people: James Sunderland, Angela Orozco, and Eddie Dombrowski, who all get called to the town to confront their repressed memory and guilt over murders they committed. Eddie was ridiculed and bullied, Angela was raped by her father, and James was fatigued and dissatisfied waiting on his terminally ill wife Mary. The game is told from James's perspective, with Angela's and Eddie's experiences being needled out through James's interactions with them. And there's a whole lot more to it than that, but that's the gist. I put out a short, unscripted video on my thoughts about the Silent Hill 2 remake after I first beat it. My general thoughts were that it was pretty decent, but paled in comparison to the original game for myriad reasons. Mainly that in AAA-ifying the game, overhauling combat, making enemies more dynamic, adding extra phases for bosses, James's dodging and iframes, the absolutely horrendous tracking that sees enemies sliding around floors like a kid on Heelys, all the chase sequences, and codifying design and interactions, they ended up unintentionally removing a lot of the mystery, intrigue, and sense of omnipresent evil that makes Silent Hill 2 Original so compelling and overwhelming. Please take my word, if you've only ever experienced the remake and not the original, you are doing yourself a disservice. Look past the annoying camera, unwieldy controls, and clunky combat, and Silent Hill 2 Original manages to grip you despite its flaws. It claws you into a frightening pit of madness, despair, evil, and self-deconstruction that the remake simply fails to emulate despite its best efforts. Also, it took me 5 hours in this latest playthrough to remember how to do this, but if you hold down the sprint button after readying your melee weapon, you can do a quick swing with the action button, and it's so much fucking better. Oh my gosh. Creator Bob Vids on YouTube has a great video called Bloober Team Bites about Bloober's tendency to just straight up copy ideas and concepts to use in their games, and there's a bit of that here in the remake. Though I would say here it feels more like inspiration than downright stealing. The movement, the sound design, environmental puzzles, and brutality of combat are influenced heavily by The Last of Us, and the overall game structure, especially the design of its mazes and horror sequences, is influenced by Resident Evil games. This all works for the most part, but starts to feel off when iconic moments of Silent Hill 2 are recreated with this new AAA sheen, like the well moment. While heading to the jail in the original, there's this real sense of confusion and being lost as you eventually figure out you have to strike the walls to try to find a way out. The remake completely ruins this by clearly telegraphing what you need to do, giving you the answer before you've even heard the question. There are also certain sequences that are weirdly reframed. Pyramid Head comes across as less sexually violent in the remake, and overall, a little goofier. The remake is needlessly way longer than the original, and I can't really figure out why. It's like time dilation almost. You're hitting all the same beats as the original, but it's all taking place twice or 3 times as long. The original allowed you to move through its various puzzle areas, the apartment, the hospital, the jail, the hotel, at your own pace, feeling the oppressive scale and unwieldiness of these areas bear down on you as you run through their repetitive halls and locked doors. The remake instead funnels you into scripted linear set pieces, some of them being literal combat gauntlets, which just makes the whole experience feel lesser. And the new mechanics make some of these sequences laughable. This is how I handled the third gauntlet in the last bit of the labyrinth. Every exploit I use, I found on my own, by the way. This time I just got into this area, didn't feel like fighting, so I decided to just wing it and exploit James's iframes and enemy pathing until time ran out, and it fucking worked. Enemies sometimes ragdoll incessantly after death, and even ragdoll when being redrawn back into the scene, which gets distracting when you notice it. Mannequins look like total dipshits when you find their hiding spots from an angle where they can't notice. The spider mannequins get stuck all the time. Nurses can get you stuck in walls, and their tremble thing, I don't know, it just looks a little silly to me. I know that's in the original game too, by the way, but it was a lot less obvious there. I like little details like how the mannequins' weak points are their slender, shapely legs, but these fuckers are so annoying to fight and have the worst tracking of all the enemies. Fighting them at melee range feels like I'm playing the UFC video game. Silent Hill 2 Remake adds a bunch of details and general fluff that overall makes it feel like a fan game. What if you could see the imprint of James's ring around his finger? What if the Neely's Bar jukebox played the main theme and triggered James's memory? What if there was a sexy nurse outfit at the strip club? We will come back to this one, by the way. This has the energy of capital G gamers who think anything that was removed from a game was either censored or cut content. And they don't stop to think, sometimes artists choose to remove things or not include things because it just doesn't fit the experience that the creators are trying to cultivate. This is why I'm always suspicious of mods that, quote, restore cut content, because sometimes I wonder, does it actually make the game experience better, fuller, more thematically appropriate? Or did we just put this in because we want more stuff? Bloober Team is like, yeah, we love Silent Hill 2, but it really didn't feel complete without 3 separate sequences where James stuffs his hand into a hole. When the original repeats a sequence, it feels deliberate, like it's building toward something. When the remake repeats a sequence, it feels formulaic, like it's saying the same joke over and over until it stops being funny.
I hate valve puzzles.
It makes the whole game feel far less subtle and more like it's playing into the predetermined sensibilities of the audience. It's putting on airs, waiting for the applause like a Marvel movie, introducing a fan favorite character, and it gets super distracting if you knew Silent Hill 2 original even moderately well like I do.
Ugh. This town's full of monsters. Who could just sit here and eat pizza?
I don't think I'm a particularly subtle writer myself, as I learned everything I know about storytelling from my mentor, best friend, and husband, Hideo Kojima. But there's a difference when adapting a story that's meant to be as amorphous and esoteric as Silent Hill 2 was. You couldn't remake Bloodborne or Elden Ring and just start adding a bunch of hints and detail, because doing so inherently weakens the gossamer weave of interconnected threads those narratives are composed of. This is a good time to mention that overall, as a complete unit, I like the Silent Hill 2 remake. I think it's a generally well-made game, reductive AAA-isms aside. It's scary, it's pretty, it's got atmosphere. Eddie's performance in particular is exceptional, but the more time I spend with it and thinking about it, the more my disdain for it grows. I've mentioned this before, but I can't shake the feeling that I'd just rather be playing the original. It's not just gameplay or narrative, it's the collection of blooberisms, things they added or took away that make the whole experience feel cheapened somehow. There are very few instances where I feel that Bloober's interpretation made the Silent Hill 2 experience better or more impactful. One is the cutscene in Heaven's Night where Maria's flirtation chips away at James's shell. I always did think it was weird that there's no cutscene or dialogue in Heaven's Night. There's all this sexual tension building between James and the seductive Maria, and our last 2 encounters with Pyramid Head showcasing James's animalistic and impersonal craving for sex. James's predisposition toward violence, especially against women, is tangible. Pyramid Head's repeated killing of Maria calls back to James's own violence against Mary, and Pyramid Head's sexual dominance over the grotesque but shapely creatures of Silent Hill shows that James doesn't want to make love, he wants to control, dissect, and consume, leaving those he's been with, those faceless substitutes for Mary, used up and thrown away. That feverish desire swells just beneath the surface, but the game doesn't outwardly acknowledge any of it in the strip club itself. The remake changes that in its interpretation, and James's yearning for sex and his alcoholism are depicted in a way that feels both powerful and true to his character.
Here.
What are you doing?
Something to take the edge off. No? You sure? Fine. Be that way. Here's to hope. Undying.
We should probably get going.
But then, like, right after, you can find a wedding ring in the strip club's Lost and Found, which is like, okay, I get it. Then there's a nurse uniform on one of the booth seats, and it's like, really? This isn't in the original game as far as I know, and it's just distracting. Was one of the strippers dressing up as a nurse? Or was there a nurse moonlighting as a stripper? Like, obviously, I get that this is hinting at James's fetishization of the nurses. James likely was surrounded by hot nurses during Maria's stay in the hospital. Oh my gosh, I'm just now getting the symbolic parallels between gameplay James leaving sickly Maria behind in a small, isolated hospital room while sexy, faceless nurses come at him from all directions, and memory James, who tried and maybe failed to keep his libido in check while his wife Mary lied bedridden. Though Bloober pulls another Blooberism with this one too, showing a poster for palliative care just outside the room. I have to admit, I didn't know what the word palliative meant until looking it up. It has to do with care for vicious disease. But even not knowing that, this felt really on the nose. That makes this nurse outfit bullshit even more annoying and confusing. Did we need an extra layer of justification to explain the sexualized nurses? Or is it hinting that Mary was a nurse? Or Maria? Did James cheat on Mary with a nurse? Like, genuinely, am I just being stupid here? Then there's the Moonlight Grove scene right after, and just, why is this in the game, you know? I don't see why they felt this was necessary to recapturing the spirit of Silent Hill 2. There's something as well about James's performance in the remake that rubs me the wrong way. In the original, James comes across as a dopey little oaf, which makes the reveal that he's a craven, horny murderer hit even harder. It's like he's thoroughly managed to lie to himself. The lie became the man. His conversations all feel incredibly genuine, especially when he loses his composure.
What's that letter?
None of your business. You didn't love Mary anyway.
Wait! How do you know Mary's name?
In the remake, James affects this soft-spoken demeanor, what I can only describe as forced frailty.
What you got there?
None of your business. You didn't love Mary anyway.
What? Hey, wait! How do you know her name?
He uses this passive stature while talking to Eddie, Angela, or Laura, and it comes across as fake, like he's adopting the emotional distance and assumed authority of a doctor or a therapist to avoid connecting on a deeper level or revealing too much about himself.
Angela. Okay. Look, I'm not sure what you're planning, but there's always another way.
Really? What's the point? It's easier just to run. Maybe it's all we deserve.
We?
Me. You. We're all the same.
I'm not like you.
That's obviously not to say therapists are fake, but, you know, they're not friends. They have a professional relationship and therefore rely on some degree of interpersonal distance and firm boundaries to maintain objectivity. Unless your name is Kendra, in which case your therapist probably definitely just wants to sleep with you, 100%.
He had probably played out that fantasy so many times in his head.
And just imagine a therapist who talks reasonably and prescriptively, but just cheated on and murdered his wife a little while ago. Like, that's what this feels like.
I'm not like you.
James's almost clinical and measured distance in the face of Angela's, Eddie's, and Laura's stark emotionality feels like a pretense. I read it as condescension, like he's rolling his eyes at their mental difficulties, going through the motions of feigned interest out of sheer obligation, and ultimately absolving himself of responsibility for them.
I see that you didn't make it out yet.
Yeah. I just didn't get around to it yet.
At least you got your appetite back.
It's not a conversation between equals, and to me, it makes James seem disingenuous, especially during his interactions with Laura in the hospital, where we see him attempt the forced frail mode before his shell completely cracks and he yells, calling Laura a literal child, a liar, and a brat.
Okay, wait here. Laura?
Haha!
Open the door,
I'm a liar, right? Want me to open it? Huh? Do ya?
Laura, open this door right now.
What's the magic word?
Laura.
Nope, that's not it. I guess I won't open it.
Get out of here, you brat!
And with Maria, he's uneasy around her, and it shows. Their dialogue feels even more conversational than his with Eddie or Angela.
Hey. You okay?
I'm sorry.
That's fine. What's going on? Are you hurt?
This may have been an intentional direction for Remake James, but I still don't like this iteration of him. His words and demeanor feel conniving and manipulative in a way that I find unsympathetic, and it makes the reveal that he murdered Mary feel far less impactful. In both games, Eddie and Angela clock James for who he is long before James realizes it himself.
You think it's okay to kill people? You need help, Eddie. Don't get all holy on me, James! This town called you too! You and me are the same! We're not like other people! Don't you know that?
But Remake James feels like he's just knowingly, intentionally lying to everyone the whole time, which makes the entire work deconstructing his character throughout the game feel more for the benefit of the audience than for James himself. I'm sorry, did I just get stuck on terrain again? 2 Bloober Team games in a fucking row, what the fuck? With Silent Hill 2 Remake's tertiary characters, the one who leave notes lying around but are never seen, we see recurring motifs of psychotic episodes. One of the motifs we see explored in the remake is people, usually men, in positions of power, who succumb to psychotic breaks, losing their grip on reality and begin using their authority to enact harm on those in their care. In my experience, this angle is emphasized a lot more in the remake than in the original, unless I just missed the notes in the original, which serve a similar purpose. In the original, authority figures read more as having this righteous indifference to the suffering of those under them. I think I like this theming in the remake overall, and it raises important and somewhat difficult questions about power and mental health and systemic harm. Some of it feels like it plays into Bloober Team's blooberisms surrounding the nature of harm and mental health, but I do like that this angle highlights James's characterization in the original as the oppressor. I subscribe to the reading of Silent Hill that every person called to the town has their own Silent Hill. That is to say that the monsters and horrors of the space manifest differently for different people. Guilty souls can see each other and interact, but they rarely see what another person sees.
You're not friends with that red pyramid thing, are you?
Red pyramid thing? I don't know what you're talking about.
This is also why Laura roams freely and carelessly around the town, singing songs, drawing pictures. Laura isn't a murderer. Probably. Laura doesn't see monsters or rust or blood, only the pale facades of a long abandoned town she now has to herself.
This is no place for a kid. There are all sorts of strange things around here. I can't believe you haven't even gotten a scratch on you.
Why should I?
This is also why Maria never interacts with the other characters. She's not real like they are. She's a manifestation of James's desire. This makes it all the more interesting then that after descending deep into his own inner prison, striking nondescript walls, succumbing to the madness of guilt and isolation, James gets to peer partly into his own psyche. In the original game, he picks up 3 tablets: the gluttonous pig, the aforementioned oppressor, and the seductress. This reads as James's inner thoughts regarding Eddie, himself, and Angela? Angela's a young woman who says she was drawn to Silent Hill looking for her mother. As a child, she was sexually abused by her father and maybe her brother as well, although I don't remember where I got that from. She suffers from some sort of arrested development or split personality. Her voice code switches at times as her personality shifts between childish delusion and adult cynicism.
Mama, why are you running away? my mama? It's you! Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for saving me. But I wish you hadn't.
Angela's boss sequence in the remake is one of the only sections in the game that I would say is better than the original despite being less subtle. It really isn't anything special on the surface, and some of it feels heavy-handed, but the sound and environment design is what does it for me. Rotting industrial machinery pressing, jutting, creaking, and wheezing against fleshy walls in repetitive cycles as a metaphor for the dehumanizing violence of rape is so immensely chilling, even on this latest playthrough. And the creature's remake design is disgustingly macabre in an excellent way. Truly stomach-churning stuff. I mean, the actual boss fight itself was easy as fuck. You can melee only this thing without taking a single hit. But you know, you can't win them all. This is one of few areas where Bloober's expansion of a metaphor from the original worked really well, even if Angela overall feels weaker in the remake. I like that Angela appears younger in the remake, but her performance adds this dangerously irrational quality that makes her feel more like a caricature of a mentally unstable person than a three-dimensional character.
You didn't happen to see a little girl around here, did you?
A little girl?
Yeah, Angela? Are you all right? Angela?
No. Please. You shouldn't be here.
Angela, it's okay.
No, don't touch me!
In the original, Angela's performance comes across more as deep psychological confusion, comorbid with some kind of delusion or psychosis. It genuinely reminds me of the flighty nature of many of my conversations with Q, the rapid flitting between ideas and topics, the vague suicidality, the delirious highs, the cavernous lows, and the sharp fluctuations between them. In his interactions with Eddie and Angela, James comes across as relatively harmless, except in the remake where he punches Eddie. I don't know how I feel about that moment. But despite James's clear, extremely repressed sexual desires, he doesn't come across as though he's predating on Angela, or on Laura for that matter, or on Eddie for that matter, but I'm pretty sure James is straight and not a pedophile. He manifests Maria and fights very hard physically to restrain his desire for her, but once we reach the labyrinth, which fucking sucks in the remake by the way, like holy shit, it's overly long and drawn out and has these stupid fucking forced combat sequences I mentioned before, but in the original I somehow managed to avoid encountering Pyramid Head. I also didn't realize how fucking OP the shotgun is in the original. I played on hard and you just get so much ammo for it and it just fucking melts most of the bosses. Also, I viscerally hate the last two bosses of the original game. Whoever designed these has committed crimes against humanity. I seriously need to stop replaying the original game on hard. But also, how did anyone ever do this before save states? Anyway, where was I? Right, James. Once he spots Maria in the labyrinth, he is just about ready to pounce on her. And can you even blame him?
It doesn't matter who I am. I'm here for you, James. See? I'm real. Don't you want to touch me?
Yes, ma'am.
Come and get me. I can't do anything through these bars.
Oh, fuck. But anyway, it's just fascinating then to see this James in contrast with his overall neutrality towards Angela. James, moments later, rescues Angela from sexual assault, although the remake switches the order of this in a way I find frustrating. And despite James not doing anything to harm her, Angela accurately pings him for the kind of man that would use a woman for sex and hurt his own wife.
Oh, I see. You're trying to be nice to me, right? I know what you're up to. It's always the same. You're only after one thing.
No, that's not true at all.
You don't have to lie. Go ahead and say it. Or you could just force me. Beat me up like... You always did. You only care about yourself anyway. You disgusting pig.
Angela.
Don't touch me! You make me sick. You said your wife Mary was dead, right?
Yes. She was ill.
Liar! I know about you. You didn't want her around anymore. You probably found someone else.
That's ridiculous. I never...
And this comes after James places those 3 tablets I mentioned, a moment that isn't in the remake. As he's placing the tablets, James doesn't know yet that Angela's been assaulted, but subconsciously he labels Angela, the only woman in Silent Hill that he's seen besides Maria, as the seductress. He sees Angela in the same dehumanizing, hypersexual way that he saw the nurses, the psychiatric inpatients, all faceless, fleshy, leggy mannequins, all coming after him, tempting him. It makes sense then that the abstract daddies, the creature representing Angela's father, start appearing in the hotel later. I've seen a video suggesting their inclusion in the hotel wasn't intended as metaphor, instead it's just copy-pasted for its own sake, maybe to cover up development shortcomings. This is further evidenced by the fact that they don't appear in the remake, though again, I really don't think Bloober should be the authority on what was intended by the original team and what wasn't. I used to think this was a cut corner too, seeing as how so many games recycle bosses to use as common enemies, but these guys only show up after James discovers Angela was sexually assaulted, and there were 4 other enemies, including these long tongue having ass hanging dudes, that the game could have used instead if the goal was just to pad the game. Why introduce a new common enemy type, and only for this area, and why not instead one of the other bosses? After this latest playthrough, it reads to me as more of James's demons coming to light. Angela likens him to her father, how she sees all men, singularly viewing women as objects for sexual gratification, and James internalizes that accusation, which manifests now as shame and guilt over his own repressed sexuality. Characters in Silent Hill regularly take on the expectations, justified or otherwise, of those around them. We see similarly repeated enemy designs and tellingly similar internalization occur with Hinako in Silent Hill F. Silent Hill F is the latest entry in... Alright, now I'm just fucking around. Look, I liked Silent Hill F. I think I liked it more than the remake. I thought it was pretty good with some excellent characters, a strong narrative, compelling themes and sequences, and horrific creature designs. But after the school section, it devolves into an unending series of Souls-like combat gauntlets and chase sequences that gets so unbelievably tiresome by the end of the game. I don't need to talk about Silent Hill F. I'd recommend Super Eyepatch Wolf's video on it instead. I did, unfortunately, watch Return to Silent Hill for this video, and I truly cannot justify integrating a close reading of it into this video, because while that film helped me realize some blind spots in my ramblings here, the movie loses the plot so thoroughly that it would derail this entire video. As I've mentioned in the past, I don't like making things unless I feel I have something unique or meaningful to contribute, but part of me just really wants to talk about Return to Silent Hill, so I might make a follow-up to this, whatever it is, sometime in the future. The most insidious thing about Silent Hill, the town, is how it pulls people apart from one another. It isolates them, suffocating them with fog and ambiguity and uncertainty. And this isolation is so thorough that it begins external like a cold chill, but very quickly seeps into the soul, freezing someone from the inside out until they're numb to all feeling but fear and anger. This loneliness is implied at first. There are frequent throwaway lines where Eddie and Angela refuse to travel with James, even if it would be safer to do so. This hyper-individualism is exemplified most explicitly in the iconic line where James berates Eddie for not bothering to look after Laura.
Bye-bye.
Wait! Come back! Eddie, let's go after her.
Huh? Laura? But why?
Laura. Is that her name?
That's what she said.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
She said she was fine by herself. She said a fatso like me would just slow her down.
Forget you.
This serves to me as further evidence of individual Silent Hills. Each person lives a life and experience insulated from those around them, and in a metaphysical sense, they might literally be unable to step foot into the other's other worlds. All they can do is glimpse, peek through the blinds, and read into what the others consciously or inadvertently reveal about themselves. Towards the end of the hotel dungeon, James and Angela cross paths for the final time. By this point, James has killed Eddie and has learned or remembered that he murdered his wife Mary. What follows is a difficult scene where Angela parts ways with James, seemingly choosing oblivion.
Angela, no.
Thank you for saving me. But I wish you hadn't. Even Mama said it. I deserved what happened.
No, Angela, that's wrong.
No, don't pity me. I'm not worth it. Or maybe you think you can save me. Will you love me? Take care of me? Heal all my pain? That's what I thought. James, give me back that knife.
No, I won't.
Saving it for yourself?
Me? No, I'd never kill myself. It's hot as hell in here.
You see it too. For me, it's always like this.
There's genuine brilliance in the art direction of the original in having the camera shift to James's perspective as she derides his attempts to help her, and further brilliance in James's uncharacteristic silence during the interrogation. Not only is this one of the few times in the game where Angela is framed from a taller, more authoritative position than James, as opposed to the lower, smaller stature she often has beside him, but it also makes their words feel like they're hitting at something deep inside James. She's talking past him, through him, and addressing the player too. Angela cynically rejects the savior framework and maybe even the concept of being saved at all, where the medium declares stoically you can't save everyone as an indictment on anyone who's been through personality-shattering trauma. Angela announces, almost as a challenge, you can't save me, or perhaps even more painfully, salvation isn't real. Angela conveys in so many words, don't pretend you care if you don't really care, if you can't care enough, because you could never care enough. I can't help but think of the comments under Cyber Yamu's video, the constant refrains of "I can fix her." Even if they are joking, which is still gross as hell, by the way, they convey to me an all too familiar distance that exists between strangers occupying a common space. This is the voyeurism I spoke of before, pain and trauma as a spectacle to be consumed for a time, then turned off when it's no longer entertaining or valuable. None of these people really care, and even if they did in some genuine, albeit parasocial way, individually they could never care enough. I get the same vibe from Marianne in The Medium, sending souls to pass on largely because they happen to be obstacles in her path. There's immense emotional separation there. Marianne barely knows their names, let alone their lives or who they were as people. She gleans what she can from the little artifacts they left behind after death, and in a messianic way, this is framed as some profound, meaningful understanding as their spirits are finally allowed rest.
It's okay. You can be free now, Tori.
Thank you. Thank you.
You did it, Marianne. Sent them away. To a better place, I hope.
Angela refuses to be the sacrificial lamb that Lily was, and further rejects James or anyone else as a messiah. She's acting on her own will for herself alone. James accepts this too. James doesn't care about Angela. He says over and over again that he's there to find his Mary. Angela is a stranger on that road who gives him directions and goes on her way. Her history is an obstacle on his journey, much like the histories of the spirits Marianne encounters. And even if James did care, he on his own could never love her enough. As a proxy for the player, as she looks directly into the camera toward us, there's an understanding that even if we cared, from the other side of the screen, there's simply nothing we can do for Angela. We could never love her enough. James's refusal to return Angela's knife to her doesn't read to me as James trying to prevent Angela's suicide. Instead, he's just refusing to be the one to give her the tools to go about it, refusing to take part any further. James is relinquishing himself of the responsibility for what Angela chooses to do next. There's maturity in that choice, maybe, but also a cold, apathetic stillness. The path lies open for James, and he refuses to step after her. Angela gives James the knife during the first dungeon, or the second, I guess, if you're the remake and you have 2 apartment sequences because you love padding shit out for no reason. Anyway, when Angela gives James the knife, it's implied that she's putting suicide on hold. She's entrusting James with her choice to carry on. After the final scene in the stairwell, the knife remains in your inventory until the end of the game. To my knowledge, it doesn't do anything. You can't use it for anything. It just sits there in one of your infinite pockets, a lingering memory of a question that goes unaddressed, unanswered. There's no community here, just a writhing, itching swell of flesh. I couldn't read Q's mind, but she talked over and over about how lonely she was. Even when we were together, she'd tell me through text after our hangouts. She would say that she couldn't trust anyone. Whether this was related to her delusion or not, it feels clear to me that she had internalized her isolation such that no matter how much joy or warmth she felt being with me, she could not shake it off. I don't know if I can put into words the burning existential terror and sadness of sitting there, watching someone you care about suffer and knowing that despite all your efforts, nothing you do or say can make a difference. I keep having this writer's urge to connect all the pieces, to level critique of my many mistakes and shortcomings and provide analysis of Q's symptoms and actions in a way that achieves some narrative catharsis and deeper meaning behind everything that occurred. The vaguely biblical mythology that the medium seems to subscribe to separates the person from their behavior, which justifies evil at worst and at best is somewhat dehumanizing. And it necessitates the Messiah figure, a Lily or a Marianne, to absorb the evil, the pain, the violence, to forgive everyone, and consequently bring about love, peace, prosperity, and purpose. But deep in my heart, I'm painfully aware that all of what occurred was the meaningless chaos of an apathetic sympathetic universe. That Q got a bad pull, the schizophrenia pull, and it caused her life to fall apart, her relationships to corrode. And through some more randomness, I just happened to be there to witness it. The amalgamation of my own biology and history and idiosyncrasy made me the kind of person to try to do something to stop it instead of walking away. Maybe I just selfishly and foolishly succumbed to the same savior complex that Angela criticizes amid the blaze in the stairwell. In any case, none of this pain made us better or stronger. None of it really meant anything. The Plague is an existential novel by Albert Camus. Released in 1947, The Plague follows the account of Rue, a doctor in a small port town, Oran, off the coast of Algeria. Oran is closed off from the world after the outbreak of a deadly disease. The Plague is a deeply tragic contemplation on love, human relationships, and the graphic ugliness of watching the human spirit dissolve as disease, death, poverty, fear, and isolation take hold. In the face of such horrors, it's the little things, the small efforts that begin to matter. One character, Grand, for instance, obsesses over writing and rewriting a singular passage of a novel he's looking to produce. He asks Rue for suggestions throughout, finding himself unable to find the right string and order of words to fulfill his intent for the project. By the end of The Plague, when the disease has finally been successfully battled back and the town reopens, we get the following passage. On his doorstep, Grand bade the doctor good night. He was going to put in an evening's work, he said. Just as he was starting up the stairs, he added that he'd written to Jean and was feeling much happier. Also, he'd made a fresh start with his phrase. I've cut out all the adjectives. The conditions of extreme isolation and terror create the necessity for these little obsessions, these small efforts, monotonous everyday duties to take precedence in a suffering mind. It's these small efforts that those onlookers, James, Marianne, Cyber Yamu's voyeurs, will never grasp, never understand, because even if their empathy is genuine, they can, from a distance, only make out the superficialities, the recognizable emotional beats of the narrative of tragedy, but not the infinitesimal pangs of flailing humanity and existential turmoil, and the thoughtless, desperate clinging just for the sake of having something to hold on to. To live in this state of suffering is to be fundamentally alone. Sometimes at midnight, in the great silence of the sleep-bound town, the doctor turned on his radio before going to bed for the few hours sleep he allowed himself. And from the ends of the earth, across thousands of miles of land and sea, kindly, well-meaning speakers tried to voice their fellow feeling, and indeed did so, but at the same time proved the utter incapacity of every man truly to share in suffering that he cannot see. Oran, Oran! In vain the call rang out over oceans. In vain Rue listened hopefully. Always the tide of eloquence began to flow, bringing home still more the unbridgeable gulf that lay between Grand and the speaker. Oran, we're with you, they called emotionally, but not, the doctor told himself, to love or to die together. And that's the only way. They're too remote. For those embedded in the suffering, living it day in and out, the future, hope, and love become luxuries in which they cannot afford to indulge. This absence comes with it the low-flying dread of apathy, wearisome routine, and sometimes deep, burning pain. Naturally, they retained the attitudes of sadness and suffering, but they had ceased to feel their sting, Rue remarks. This was precisely the most disheartening thing, that the habit of despair is worse than despair itself. Some lines later, he adds, without memories, without hope, they lived for the moment only. Indeed, the here and now had come to mean everything to them, for there is no denying that the plague had gradually killed off in all of us the faculty not of love only, but even of friendship. Naturally enough, since love asked something of the future, and nothing was left us but a series of present moments. The night of our fight, when I first found her after her breakdown, Q cried over and over, "Nobody loves me." When isolation spreads, eating someone from the inside out like disease, how do you cure it? How can you convince them otherwise? I settled on community, a dedicated, caring community of loving, intentional people. It's impossible for one person to love enough on their own. The plague details this, the inefficacy of individual love. Not only is it impossible to sustain, but it simply isn't big enough. It cannot be big enough to cure or even meet the physical ills and yearning that afflict those around us. Rambert, a journalist who is stranded in Oran after its lockdown, spends the majority of the novel feeling distant from the town. He hopes for a way to escape and return to a woman whom he initially calls his wife, with whom he shared a brief but intimate and deeply meaningful relationship. As the novel progresses, Rambert is struck with the sudden pangs of longing and what I read as guilt of realizing how insufficient his love is in the face of crisis and isolation. It was at this moment, as he walked in the dark streets along which ambulances were speeding, that it suddenly struck him that all this time he'd practically forgotten the woman he loved. So absorbed had he been in trying to find a rift in the walls that cut him off from her. But at this same moment, now that once more all ways of escape were sealed against him, he felt his longing for her blaze up again, with a violence so sudden, so intense that he started running to his hotel, as if to escape the burning pain that nonetheless pervaded him, racing like wildfire in his blood. It's simply not possible for an individual to love someone all the time. Even if James had selflessly met Angela where her yearning for human connection and understanding needed him to be, he could not have saved her emotionally on his own. In that moment, either due to her internalized isolation or even just cynicism wrought by the violence she experienced, Angela recognizes how powerless one person's love is, so she chooses to go her own way instead. At that moment, he knew what his mother was thinking, and that she loved him. But he knew too that to love someone means relatively little, or rather that love is never strong enough to find the words befitting it. Thus, he and his mother would always love each other silently, and one day she or he would die, without ever all their lives long having gone farther than this by way of making their affections known. It's a bleak and painful understanding of human relationships, but one in which I find more and more resonance and meaning in the face of all that's gone on. Maybe recognizing this will help me take the first steps to forgiving myself for everything I did wrong and everything I failed to do. Toward the end of the novel, Rambert finds himself taking ownership of this new space, his found community. Until now, I always felt a stranger in this town, and that I'd no concern with you people. But now that I've seen what I have seen, I know that I belong here whether I want it or not. This business is everybody's business. This isn't love per se, but rather an indefatigable push toward preserving humanity for its own sake. In fact, this push, this instinct to empathize, is poised almost as a separate, thoughtless and mechanical process. A man can't cure and know at the same time, Rue says. So let's cure as quickly as we can. Empathy is a necessity to get through the hard times, and this community is what maintains survival. This is the community Lillian is denied after being bullied by the other kids, and worse, trapped in an effective prison by her own father. There are parallels to how the other kids stuffed her in a locker and how her father locks her away. She was doomed by estrangement and isolation, not some curse. James, Angela, and Eddie similarly are cut off from community by the town itself. In that still loneliness, their worst demons emerge to haunt them. But empathy and community on their own aren't enough either. As powerless as it is, we need individual love too. And he, Rue, thought it too, that a loveless world is a dead world. And always there comes an hour when one is weary of prisons, of one's work, and of devotion to duty, and all one craves for is a loved face, the warmth and wonder of a loving heart. That individual love is the prize we strive for when the battle is done and all the suffering, even if just temporarily, is over. Rue remarks of Rambert, who is reunited with his partner after the town reopens. But others, like Rambert, had, without faltering, welcomed back the loved one they thought was lost to them. And, for some time anyhow, they would be happy. They knew that if there was one thing one can always yearn for and sometimes attain, it is human love. Silent Hill 2's happiest ending, Leave, ends with this love and some degree of reconciliation.
James. Please. Please do something for me. Go on with your life.
We finally hear all of Mary's letter to James, the letter that drew him to Silent Hill, the letter he refused to accept until the end. It's bittersweet knowing what James did to her, but I love that Silent Hill 2 explores the nature of ambivalence, how fulfilling but also confusing, frustrating, and painful attachment can be.
Forgive me.
I told you that I wanted to die, James. I wanted the pain to end.
That's why I did it, honey. I just couldn't watch you suffer. No. That's not true. You also said you didn't want to die. The truth is, I hated you. I wanted you out of the way. I wanted my life back.
James, if that were true, then why do you look so sad?
Writer Xiaban Brier Aguilar mentions this phenomenon of intrusive thoughts occurring as a common symptom of caregiver burnout.
But I wanted to include an important caveat that if it is true that Gilbert only thought about killing Rhea, then I really want to avoid criticizing her for those thoughts, and I'll tell you why. First, thoughts of hurting the person who you're caring for is unfortunately a very common symptom of caregiver burnout. And if you're a caregiver for someone and you have thoughts like that, I want you to know that you're not a freak or a monster, but you should seek support, and I'll leave some resources in the video description.
I think it's safe to assume James suffered similar burnout, but in his isolation, he yielded to his intrusive thoughts, then shut the rest of himself away. Leave also gives a promise of community. James and Laura welcome each other into their lives and finally escape the oppressive isolation of the town. Like Rambert, they found that they were no longer strangers. They belonged to each other, whether they want it or not. Indeed, when does a stranger stop being a stranger? When does a person become a friend? Resident Evil Requiem embraces this budding establishment of community as well, highlighting literal physical connection when Leon decides to sit with Grace in the dark.
There's no way out, is there?
Well, I'm not going to leave your side. I'm going to sit right here with you.
And when Chris Redfield's team arrives to save Leon and Grace from certain death. Sadly, we don't get to see Chris, nor do any boulders get punched, but we can dream. We can dream. Not only that, though, Requiem showcases the joy of individual love, that between Grace and Emily, as we see Grace accepting a big sisterly role in Emily's life. Requiem also endorses the underlying mechanisms of community, with Grace talking on the phone with Leon, asking about Sherry, filling him in on their lives, at peace, no longer stuttering. In contrast, the medium's obsessive fixation on hyper-individualism, its refusal to acknowledge the power of community, and Lily's yearning for individual love is ultimately, I think, why its narrative comes across as so cold, so bleak, so fundamentally cruel to those who suffer. Marianne's and Thomas's concern for Lily masquerades as love, but is instead a deaf adherence to the idea of individual responsibility, that as long as Lily is put away, the world will be safe from the demon she unleashed. There is no community judgment for Richard's action, that he sexually assaulted a child. Thomas just goes inside his mind and spiritually murders him, leaving him a brain-dead husk.
Don't you think he would be better off in a nursing home? What about his family?
Richard doesn't have any family.
Oh, the poor man. It's like he's somewhere else?
This act indirectly leads to the fire, which causes Lily to release the maw, by the way.
You think you're tough? When you hear them squeal and you smell their bodies burning, you'll tell me everything. You'll beg me to listen.
Throughout the medium, there's no path for healing, no path to make things right. And separately, Marianne and Thomas make every decision on their own, blunder carelessly through other people's lives and memories and histories. Thomas is even split from his other self, further cutting himself off from building anything larger and more powerful than his own ego. There is no village to build, no coalescence of wills and intent. Everyone's stranded on their own island, and all the trees are burning down. In the plague, so much of the town's fight against the disease feels futile. Even the generally joyous end of the narrative is tinged with the somber understanding that no disease is ever permanently eradicated. Whatever afflicted them might return someday in some new form. But while that beast is raging and the town rises instinctively to battle it back, everyone understands that that fight is all they have. I think back to Rambert's quote, "This business is everybody's business." How can someone witness such suffering and simply look away?
Finish this.
Only you can end this.
You can't always save everyone, Butterfly.
Despite my thoughts on the game itself and how its narrative characterizes those who have suffered immense pain and those who perpetrate it, I can't lie and say that the medium's conclusion isn't compelling. If I could rewind time and try to help Q again, reach out to different people, say different words, do different things with her, show up at the right time every time, would any of it have changed anything at all? Maybe I bumbled along, making all the wrong choices like Thomas. Maybe, like Marianne, I arrived years too late, and the stage for the finale had already been set. Maybe, given a million chances, nothing I could ever have done would have helped her. As I said, it's easier, it's neater to just say I did all I could and leave it at that. So, was the medium right? If I'm answering honestly, I just don't fucking know. I don't know what degree of psychosis is untreatable, how far is too far. Part of me feels like Q's symptoms only got so severe because I was in her life. Part of me also knows that her life was already collapsing before I met her. Another part of me knows she expressed so much joy time and again at having me around, even if the outcome was inevitable. What kind of person would I be if I had just decided to look away? Where am I now personally? I'm still crying all the time, having frequent and severe panic attacks, incredibly poor, though finally have a mostly stable living situation, lonely, spiritually exhausted, disgusted by this country and the world at large, and feeling no sense of purpose or desire or direction. I find myself identifying with art in new ways, the medium and its spiritual nihilism, Silent Hill and its studies on the internalization of guilt, shame, and loneliness, the plague and its desperate yearning for love, its treatise on the despairing but foundational necessity of the present. Maybe this video wasn't a search for answers. Maybe it was a desperate attempt to find meaning in the senseless chaos of the world. Maybe it was a painful, Silent Hill-esque excision of the guilt and unease that's been growing tumorous inside me. Maybe it was me desperately holding on to the memory of someone I cared deeply for. Maybe now I can finally put at least some of this pain to rest. Maybe you can't always save everyone, but shouldn't you still try? Goodbye, Q. Hope you're still out there somewhere.